Hey guys, hitting you with another quick review today, and I'm just going to talk quickly before the year is out about the new Banshee record. I had like a short Twitter video planned for this thing, but there's really too much on this record going on just to kind of like cast it off or just kind of say one thing about it and then just, that's kind of it. I mean, for me, it is an interesting record, but it's also a flawed record. What makes it interesting is, I think compositionally, there's a lot going on here. Like, there's an incredible amount of detail in these tracks, and I like the way that Banshee sort of mixes elements of trap music, but also like ambient music too. Like, the sound of these tracks, super smooth, like very new agey, to the point where it turns me off a little bit, like not so much into that smoothness, not so much into that like raw MIDI sound that it sounds like Banshee is playing with on pretty much all of these tracks, although I do like those songs, those tracks that really do stick out to me, where Banshee is playing with like some vocal samples or something, and kind of chopping them up for like a really funky, interesting, and noisy effect. I believe the second track on the record is actually one of the grimiest and hard-hitting on the entire thing. So Banshee can go aggressive on this record, and occasionally does. But most of the album is super smooth, super easygoing. You can really kind of zone out to it. It falls into the background, but it's detailed enough that if you were to give it your full attention, you would get something out of it. But again, I'm not so much that into the smoothness, and I do think the constant raw MIDI vibe of a lot of the synth timbres and drum timbres on this thing do give it kind of a one-dimensional feel. And then the other thing about the record is that some of the songs are painfully short. Like, pretty much every track is like 1 minute to 2 minutes and change. And I feel like with there being such a high amount of detail in a lot of these tracks, they could have gone longer. There could have been more, especially since a lot of the endings on this thing are super abrupt. I do think this is another piece of evidence, or another piece of the ongoing trend within the Vaporwave community, because a lot of people will sort of classify this as a Vaporwave record, call it a Vaporwave record. I think this is another piece of evidence that Vaporwave has been diversifying, has been trying new things, has been growing, has been maturing, and I think is getting more interesting. They're moving away, further away from the stereotyped slowed down R&B samples and the marble busts on the album cover or whatever. And Banshee initially, like when this Banshee's debut record broke on YouTube, like I believe that was YouTube and Bandcamp, part of what made that record spread so virally. Mixing elements of Vaporwave with trap, that was like sort of pretty much a breaking point for like, oh, Vaporwave can do other things, like there are other tentacles to this monster, and Banshee continues to push forward, even though I think at this point that there's not too much of a Vaporwave vibe going on this record. I mean, sure, there is, again, that kind of that raw MIDI sound, there is that sort of new age vibe to it. But outside of that, this to me is like some IDM in a lot of ways, with how detailed and sort of nutty a lot of the compositions on this thing are. But again, it sort of has that spacey, very glossy and chill, laid back aesthetic to it, to the sound that that I think a lot of Vaporwave fans will vibe with, sort of regardless of what the compositions are doing. And yeah, that's sort of my take on this album. I think it's interesting. I think it's pretty good. I'm not crazy about it. It's not anything that, I feel like I would return to anytime soon, but, giving it a sort of 4 or 5 listens all the way through, I came away like, pretty impressed. It definitely felt way less, gimmicky, or sort of way less of a really obvious fusion of one world and another world like the debut did. It definitely feels like there's a bit more variety on this record as far as like the compositional styles amongst these tracks. I just wish a lot of them were sort of developed more and fleshed out a little bit more. And yeah, that's my take on the record. If you guys have given this album a listen, let me know what you thought of it. Did you love it, hate it, why? And I will catch you guys in the next review list week coming up soon. Forever.